Welcome to For the Love of Books, a podcast by CultureNL Libraries.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the CultureNL Libraries podcast For the Love of Books. My name is Chris Wilson and today I am joined by Jane Graham, who is the books editor for The Big Issue. But the real reason why we've invited her along to this podcast is because she was our reader in residence in 2014. I can't quite believe it's been that long, Jane, but it has been. And because she is also the author of a book called Letters to My Younger Self. And for that reason, we're going to call this podcast episode Podcast to My Younger Self as a kind of little touch to that book title. So welcome to the podcast, Jane.
Thanks very much, yes. And of course, I was the books ambassador for the year after that as well.
Oh yeah, that's true, that's right. Yeah, I forgot we changed your title too.
I was with, I chose that title, it sounded good. But yes, so I was with CultureNL and North Lanarkshire libraries in general for about 2.5 years in the end, I think.
Yeah.
We did a few events and things after that as well.
Yeah.
So it's been a long relationship.
It has been, and of course we've also had you back a couple of times to do kind of sort of like interviews and things like that sort of stuff at some book events and things, which have been fantastic. Can you believe it's actually been that long though? I mean, it seems just like yesterday.
I know, I'm really shocked when you had said to me it was 2016. I couldn't believe it. I still feel like I've just had to leave very reluctantly just, a few months ago. So it was actually such a long time ago that we did all those things. But they're still very clear in my mind because I just enjoyed it so much and still talk about it to people when they ask, what I've been up to if I haven't seen them for a while. Mm-hmm. I always think, I just love talking about it.
Yeah, it was a great time. Myself and some of my colleagues were quite heavily involved with you in doing a lot of things, which is fantastic. I thought we would what we do with this episode of the podcast would be to kind of have a wee look back at some of the projects and kind of remember them a little bit, and then kind of have our thoughts a bit on what you thought of the year and what you'd say to your younger self if you're looking back on it and things like that. So, but I think I'll start off with what I think is probably the cutest event that we did while we were there, which was we did a fairy hunt at Summerlee Museum, which is also a CultureNL venue, which is a nice little tie-in. And I actually still have a picture of you hanging up a little kind of fairy outfit on a washing line in somewhere, which was very cool.
Little fairy trousers and little fairy top wings and things, didn't we? On tiny washing lines between trees and bushes and things like that. For the kids to come and just discover it out of nowhere. And I remember we had little doors along the bottom of the tree trunks, little tiny fairy doors.
Yeah.
And the idea being that we would just go on a walk with the primary school kids. They were aged kind of between, what would you say, kind of 8 and 10 maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
Right. Yeah, maybe than that, and then we would just by chance let the kids out as they saw it discover, oh my goodness, look, there's a little painted door on the side of that tree trunk, and if you go around the back, look, there's a washing line. The fairies and the elves and the goblins are washing out their clothes, and it was really lovely because they thought they'd come upon it, and we were amazed that they'd discovered this magical thing. And then we talked. We sat down and I think we'd given them a list of things that they had to find or talk about.
Yeah.
Just walk, and that of course turned into this inspiring idea that they'd found this magical hidden kingdom. And from there on, we started to talk about books and ideas with these kind of magical creatures, and we talked about their own superhero favourites, their own books with fairies in them, and what they would call their books that might have fairies in them. And we ended up it kicked off this big conversation. I think the main idea of that was just to pull out their imagination,
to
take it seriously, to encourage every idea that they had. So I think that was at the heart of everything that we did, wasn't it? That we did a lot of work with kids. If you remember, when I was working, I was, as then working for The Big Issue, we actually did our children's book review that year as well, with local Motherwell. Came in and read the books and just talked to me about what they thought. And that went into the magazine UK-wide, the thoughts on these books by these kids from the local primary school. And it was all about whatever you think, whatever your ideas are, we are interested in them. We take you seriously. We're not being patronising. We're not trying to force good books on you that we think you should like. We want to know what you really are reading and to really encourage you to carry on with it. And it was so lovely to do that and to chat with them. They were so, you just pulled a little tiny bit and the enthusiasm kind of just flooded out of them. It was so nice.
Yeah, I remember that Christmas book review thing, and some of the kids, whenever they came along, at first they weren't kind of like, it was a bit kind of like this. We're too cool for this. We're not really wanting to get. But by the end of the session, every single kid had a book, and they were all engaged with it, and they were all loving it, which was fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, and especially sometimes, particularly at that age, the wee boys are more quiet to talk about books than the girls. And then they saw this huge bunch of books, and they weren't all maybe the books that the schools would always recommend. They were books about Pokemon, and there were books about funny books were mainly just jokes about, characters farting in their trousers one too many. Whatever it was, and we said, whatever you like. And then at the end, as a nice present, then we said, and take your favourite books home with you. And I remember quite a few of them saying, well, when do we have to have them back? And I said, no, take them home and keep them and read them forever. They're our present to you. And their faces just lit up.
Yeah.
And they talked to someone, but they were telling me where they were going to put their new books. And they were showing me their favourite pictures from the books and why they liked this character and that. They just came to life. And it was lovely, because what we got out of that as well was they weren't pretending to like books because they were asked to. When they were allowed to choose whatever book they wanted and take it home, they were really excited. No one said, why would I want to take a book home? They were all like, there was a couple of books that were really popular, maybe Harry Potter's or something like that. And they were almost kind of fighting for who got the last one of this. You saw books are a great present. If you get the right book for the right person, no matter what age they are, 5, 6, up until 75, 6, that is always going to be a great thing to give somebody, because it shows, as well as anything else, you've thought about them. It's not just giving them money. You've thought about them, their interests, and reflected them in what you've given them. And there's always a book that can do that. Yeah,
definitely. And for me, for the rest of the project, for me, the 3 big events that we really did were the Drowned Village Poetry Competition, the Geek Love Night at Airdrie Library, and the Stramash at Elsell Cultural Centre, which were all fantastic events. So I thought we maybe kind of touch on them a little bit more. We'll start off with the Geek Love one, I think. So you managed to get a bit of a Doctor Who legend into Airdrie Library, which is amazing. We had Terrence Dicks there in the library. So how did you manage to get such a legendary person in that world to come along to Airdrie Library?
I know, now departed, actually. I was looking, I'd taken with them next to our TARDIS at that event, and I knew it was going to be popular, but I didn't realise quite how popular. If you remember, I think we could have sold it out about 4 times over by the end. But Doctor Who fan myself, I knew that he was a legend. I knew he would pull people in, and I think I just emailed him over and over again and just showed off about how much I knew about his era, flattered his ego huge. My favourite episode just happens to be the one that you wrote, or one of the many that you wrote, and I looked into the things that he had said were his favourite things about the show, and I said, well, that was my favourite thing. Oh, was that your favourite thing as well about the show, Terence? How funny that we should all the same things. So a bit of a lot of perseverance, a bit of flattery, promise of a nice meal afterwards, which he absolutely enjoyed, and a trip to Glasgow, which a lot of people love a trip to Glasgow. You know, it's a great city and people like visiting. And I think also he knew the nature of the event meant it was going to be absolute hardcore fans. They wouldn't have to explain anything to him. They just loved the work that he'd done. And not just in Doctor Who, but they loved that genre, you know, that kind of telefantasy world, and they all knew it very well. And we got him to sign a really cool 7 Doctors poster as well, didn't he, as one of our gifts. And there was a big enthusiasm for our quiz on the basis of that prize.
Yeah.
And he absolutely loved it. He got really interested, informed, smart people came. They asked him really good questions, which he loved talking about because he loves reminiscing about Doctor Who. We also had that night, we had a TV room that you could go in and watch classical TV telefantasy shows, Doctor Who and Blake 7, and what else did we have? Space 1999, a few Terry Nation series. I think you could go and watch favourite episode. The Games Corner, where people could go and play board games. Right. And that was really popular as well. They were the last ones. We had to leave them. We had to ask them very politely to leave because it was not go. We had the quiz, which was really good laugh, really good fun, really well attended. And then we also had the option of going out and visiting the Observatory, which no one who sees that and can't believe their eyes, it's so fantastic, at the top of the Library. Yeah. So it was one of the fun things and most successful things we did.
Yeah, the last episode of our podcast actually was all about the Observatory, and we were trying to kind of highlight the kind of hidden gem that it was in the library. So was it important for you to kind of include that in that night as kind of part of it? It's kind of, was it hints to the kind of science fiction and all that sort of stuff?
Well, I mean, added to that idea, we were talking about Doctor Who and the idea of the TARDIS, you know, flying through time and space, and then you could literally go up to the observatory and feel as if you were experiencing getting closer to space, getting closer to the stars. An awful lot of people, even local people, quite know the kind of joy, the magic, the secret that was up at the top of that library. I mean, it's really incredible, the history of it when you get in there. But also for our event as well, it was just a lovely idea because I think we had events on almost every level of the library. So you were going gradually up the building, and then right at the end, it opened to the stars. So there was a kind of cinematic quality to the whole event, which ended up with you gazing out at the night sky. So I think it absolutely was such an icing on the cake.
Yeah, it was a fantastic event, and I have to. I was surprised a little bit how successful it was in terms of how quickly it sold out. I'm not a huge Doctor Who fan, I have to admit, for my sins, but and I did think, will there be enough kind of local interest? But literally, people came from all round to go to it as well. It wasn't just as if it was like people from Airdrie that came. It was the word got out and people travelled. And I remember there was this one guy in the crowd who, whenever he met Terence, he was like, "This is the best day of my life."
Right. I know. Well, I went out in fly posts because being a bit of a Whovian, I knew how popular it would be, and I remember for a few nights just going around all the gaming shops in Glasgow, various cafes where I knew my people would be, and just putting flyers out and that kind of thing. So the word got out. It was only 4 years ago, but I still don't think social media was quite as influential as it is now. But still, we did put things out on Twitter and that kind of thing, and that brought people in from much further than we had thought. And it was a shame in the end that we could only do one night and we could only do it in that space, because we could have made a huge, much bigger event. But And on the other hand, it was nice that we had a hardcore, because it was first come, first served. It was the people who were straight in there, who were the most enthusiastic, who really knew the territory. And it felt very cosy and friendly and clubby.
Yeah.
Part of the appeal of it, I think.
Yeah, I think it was quite a sort of intimate venue almost, and kind of had that feel to it. And I think people like that kind of really close, rather than being a kind of big Comic-Con type thing for them. You might not necessarily get quite so close to your right. kind of sort of legends, that it was kind of felt more personal and kind of local, I suppose, in a way. So
we locked the door basically, and you couldn't get in and you couldn't get out, and it was, so we were all together like a massive big Whovian family. A really nice atmosphere.
Yeah, it was. And one, I think probably this, I'm strong. I'm between the Drowned Village competition and the Stramash as to what was my favourite thing to do, but definitely the Drowned Village was up there. So I was collaborating with Cumbria Libraries and I don't know how you pronounce this properly. Is it Gwynedd Libraries, possibly, in Wales? And the prize was a fantastic prize. Basically, the competition was to send in a poem, and the prize would be set to music by Stuart Braithwaite from Mogwai, which is just out of this world in my opinion. Being a big Mogwai fan, that must have been quite hard to pull together as well. How did you kind of go about that?
Well, I travelled. The idea was that the poem was to be about the Drowned Village, because we'd found out about this Drowned Village in Strathclyde Park, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Well, it is now, and it was filled in with a reservoir, but right at the bottom of the reservoir were still the remnants of these buildings, which had one time been at the bottom of a valley, a village. So we asked people to write a poem about a drowned village because it was local to us. And then we looked at other areas in the UK that had a very similar thing, and they also had these drowned villages, and we widened it out, we made connections, and I visited those libraries. And they also had people from their local area write poems, and we looked at all of those. And then we had a friend of mine who's a novelist, Robert McLean Wilson. It was one of our... We had a few people, Stuart Braithwaite and Robert, and someone, was it Nicky Wire?
Yeah.
Was one of the God, what an amazing bunch of people. Judged those poems. And they just they read loads and loads of poems from our shortlist, chose their favourite, and then the winner got this prize. And Stuart's an old friend of mine, Stuart Braithwaite. And I just went out with them and said, "Are you willing to do this?" And he said, yeah, that'd be great. I love it. Who are you going to get to do the voice? He said, because my voice isn't great. He thought that I didn't say that. He said that. And I think of a really great Scottish voice, and we ended up getting Shirley Henderson, the fantastic Scottish actress who was in Harry Potter and many other brilliant things. She's got a very unique voice as well. And she, in that very delicate, fragile, floaty, ghostly voice that she has, read out the poem. And then Stuart and the guys actually from Mogwai, I think they all did something, set it to music, and it was this very atmospheric, almost creepy, beautiful poem.
And of course, the winner was Catherine Baird.
She wrote a fantastic poem. So it was quite nice because we didn't have any say in who won, but everyone picked her poem from Wales and Cumbria and us. So there was no bias in there to have a local winner from Lanarkshire in the end. Yes, and so her words were spoken by Shirley Henderson. And it was just, everything came together. Mogwai put the finished piece on their website so you could go and download it as a gift from them and from us, and just to be the final kind of kiss off on that really creative project. Yeah. Everything about it just worked really well in the end.
Yeah, it was a fantastic thing, and just to have such a kind of successful Scottish band kind of producing something for CultureNL Libraries was such an amazing thing for me. Like I say, I'm a huge Mogwai fan, so for me it was kind of like, wow.
Random, of course, because most of them are from North and South Lanarkshire. They're local boys.
Yeah.
Because we loved them. They had added connection to it all. Yeah.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was definitely nice. And of course, Stuart was involved with the Stramash as well, which was you were using your connections well for this, but the Stramash was like a 2-day event at Bellsell Cultural Centre, like nothing probably ever seen at Bellsell Cultural Centre ever before, with the lineup that you managed to get to that. It was literally a who's who of kind of Scottish kind of culture, really, and kind of further field. You Stuart Braithwaite, Colin Murray, Jenny Lindsay, Mark Thomas, Tam Cowan, Shireen Nanjani, just quite an incredible lineup of people coming to Bellsell.
Paul Legend.
Yeah, Pat Nevin too, another massive person. It was quite literally an amazing couple of nights. Did you kind of have any sleepless nights leading up to that, wondering how successful it would be with getting that kind of lineup going?
It really made me realise how terrifying events management is, because I'd never done anything like that before. I'd just been one of those cliched people from the age of about 7, where it was all about just being stuck with my head in a book all the time, real bookworm. I wasn't even particularly a very sociable person. Still am. Most of the time I do my work in my office and send out missives. I work from home. And suddenly there I was, with the help of a lot of good people, yourself included, trying to put together what was really a mini festival, a mini book festival. Because not only persuading all those people to get involved, and they all did it out of the goodness of their heart, but also then you start to worry about football. Will anyone come? How do we promote it? How do we make sure people know about it? What else can we do in the room, in the building, to make people attracted to the event? And we had one of the first 3D printer that I'd ever seen, if you remember that.
Yeah,
we did
that's right.
Minecraft room, which a lot of the kids went in, and they made, everyone had to create a Minecraft world in the time that their mum and dad hopefully were in, having a glass of wine and then going through to one of the events. We really tried to make it a very sociable, laid back, wander around, get to know people kind of event, rather than just show up for the event in the hall and then leave again. We tried to create this little buzzy atmosphere, and but I mean, literally, I had lots of sleepless nights, and I'm sure some of my hair fell out. I was so I can't believe how stressed I was about it. Even now, the night before, what if no one comes? It's really frightening.
It was, I mean, and it went really, really well as well. My highlights were definitely kind of the question time type panel event where we had Shireen Nanjani hosting it, I believe, and there was Tam Cowan and Stuart Braithwaite, Jenny Lindsay, and a few others were involved in that. And also, I'm a bit of a kind of Matt Thomas fan as well, so his kind of set that he did was fantastic as well. What were the highlights for you?
Well, yeah, very much those as well. I mean, it was a really intelligent audience, I thought, for the question time thing. And they were asking all sorts of things about libraries and culture, and how you get the people who might not normally read, how you get them to read. How do we feel about funding in the arts? All kind of areas like that were really important. And we made sure we'd quite a balanced panel. So we'd Alex Massey from The Spectator arguing with Tam Cowan about sport, football funding, the importance of libraries. And it was really, and then a really engaged, smart audience asking really good questions. Obviously, Mark Thomas's thing, he was just really on form. He was in great mood. He's very generous with those kind of things because he really believes in the power of the people, giving back, not just going to massive venues and seeing how much money he can make, but meeting people who might not normally go to a book festival or an arts festival, but really like the stand-up comedy. They came along. Mark was really good about chatting to people afterwards, didn't play the star at all. And then we also had a really good kind of Oxford Uni Star style debate, if you remember, with Colin was the host, and it was Hannah McGill, who was just finished being the director of the Edinburgh Film Festival, versus Evan, the legend that is. I think it was supposed to be sports versus culture, and then the audience vote at the end whose pro argument they thought was the strongest. But I remember in the end, Pat voted for Hannah. He said more convinced by her argument for the arts than he was by his own for sport. So Hannah won by 1 or 2 votes in the end, one of which was Pat Evans. So that was a really interesting thing as well, because we were both really respectful of the other's point of view, and Colin Murray kept a very nice light touch, so he made it fun as well. I really enjoyed that. I like that adversarial. The idea even of the name Stramash was to bring in the idea not just of sitting around chatting about books, but knowing where the passions were and where they might clash. That very Scottish, that west coast of Scotland idea of passion means there might be a bit of a rumpus, but it's because we really, really care about things and we want them to be just right. And we have our favourites and we'll fight till the end to, wave the flag for those favourites. All of those things were part of it.
Yeah, and it was a fantastic, and that's just like you say, that's kind of the highlights really of what I remember from your residency. But there was definitely loads and loads of other things we were involved in as well. It was an incredible experience for me to be involved in that, and it was something that could probably change my outlook a little bit and how we can go about kind of planning events and things like that at the time too. If you were to look back on it, and what would you say to your younger self, thinking about your kind of book and kind of letters to the younger self type idea? What would you look back and think
about the whole year? Do you mean?
The kind of reader in residence experience. Yeah.
Well, it was. I mean, I wouldn't like to ruin it too much for myself, because I think all of us learned a lot as we went, and we did quite a lot of Q&As and libraries. I think they got better and better as we went through, and we started to work out what is a good way of organising it. And I've done quite a few since, and I've learned so much from what we did that year. We had one with Mark Miller, if you remember, and great. And he was just really good. I mean, everyone we did everyone we invited along, Owen Jones as well, the journalist, was so good about giving their time and really loving meeting people. And I realised that you have to get people who aren't just there to sell books or to, promote themselves. It has to be people that are interested in meeting people who have real passions in certain areas and love to meet other people with those passions. So I would say to myself, don't just look at product that we have initially found them via. Look at the people and how they engage with other people, because you can't force that. Either you talk to people, you put them in front of an audience because they really are interested in that audience, or you bring people who just want to sell their book and then get the first train home, and you've got to know through a bit of research which is which. Don't go there. And also, I would say, involve young kids, particularly primary school kids, as much as you can to these things, because I think you're not going to reach everyone, but you might reach enough where you really think you've made a little bit of a difference, and the feeling you get from that, I think, is better than any other thing that you might do. And then I would say use emotional blackmail, bribery, anything you can, make things you can. You can't underestimate but I think those things are much more effective than how much you can pay people, because they love to talk about themselves. They really do, and of course they like to come along and sell some books, but more than that, they love the idea of just talking about themselves, what they've achieved, and hearing from people who've read their book. I think you never stop really enjoying that.
Yeah. Which kind of takes us quite nicely onto your book a little bit as well, because we'll kind of move away from your reader residence time a little bit and focus a little bit on your book for a couple of questions. Obviously, how did the concept for this come about? Because I know it kind of sort of originated a little bit in the actual Big Issue magazine itself. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I sold the idea to the magazine. I was trying to remember. It was 2007 that I did the first one. So 13 years ago was when I started doing it.
Yeah.
And that idea just to every week, speak to somebody and ask them to go back to start with their teenage self and what they'd learned and what advice they would give themselves. But through that, really get to know the person a bit better than the average interview. So make them think about, just right back in the shoes of who they were at that time, and what were their main passions, and did those passions continue to play out? Where were they in the family? Did that make a big difference in how they were going forward? And when you ask people things like, what's the biggest misunderstanding of you? Or who do you miss the most from your past? Or what is the one moment you'd like to just lock in a bottle in a jar and never let out again because it was so fabulous? You really get to the nub of who these people are. And so often when I was doing these interviews, people would say, I interviewed John Bon Jovi just this week, and he said, "Oh my God, like going to my shrink. This is so." I didn't expect it to be so intense, but he carried on going, and he sort of pulled out some of the moments that weren't so great from his life, personal stuff. And that was what I always wanted to do. Was I never asked them about the thing that we're supposed to be plugging, which the PRs don't like very much. Because that we'll put a little thing at the end saying, yeah, and you can buy this book or go and see this movie or whatever. But really it's about getting to know these people. So after about, I suppose, having done this for about 10 years and having this huge collection of interviews with people like Paul McCartney, Mo Farah, Desmond Tutu, Ranulph Fiennes, Julie Walters, so many, big interesting names. We thought, actually it wasn't me that thought it was a publisher that approached me and said, how about just collecting them all in a book and calling it simply the name of the column, Letter to My Younger Self. And it's almost like a kind of Gideon's Bible with people talking about the things that matter most to them. So if you're in a hotel room, I'm using the Gideon's Bible, I'm overusing that reference. But if you're sitting here you'd like to just read something that made you feel happy or hopeful, or think about friendship. This is the way we ended up categorizing the book. Then you could just open this and hear what Will I Am thinks about how it feels to lose someone, or who else? Olivia Colman maybe talking about friendship and how important that is to her.
Yeah.
But that was put the book together, and it was pretty successful. So I was really happy with the whole project.
Yeah, I've read through most of the letters, and the two of the ones that stood out for me were Will I Am, actually, who you just mentioned.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And the Ewan McGregor one as well, because the Ewan McGregor one for me kind of highlighted how much he kind of loved his family and also has a real passion for Scotland as well.
Yeah.
But the Will I Am one, it's literally the last paragraph in it as well about how his bandmate in the Black Eyed Peas, his adopted father told him, if you don't go to college, you're not welcome here. And you're responsible for him, and yeah, obviously it's completely worked out for them in the end. But I mean, that must have been such a big moment in both of their lives to kind of take that leap and that jump of faith, really, to kind of just go for it. And the rest is history.
And if you remember right at the end of that interview as well, this kid, Will.i.am's best friend, that's right here, who's his, compadre in the Black Eyed Peas, and he's from the Philippines, and they go back together to the Philippines where he used to get called names because, he wasn't this big macho jock. And he went back and they were all chanting his name when he went to see. And, he went back a hero. And Will.i.am said, "This is your moment, not mine," kind of step back and let him have this amazing moment. And when Will.i.am was telling me that, he was getting choked up thinking about it.
Yeah.
I was bloods thinking, I'd never heard that story before. It was such a beautiful story. And again, that was all about their friendship. And Will.i.am just came out as such a generous, spirited, lovely guy.
Yeah.
That was one that stood out. The other one that stood out for me because it was so romantic was Wilco Johnson, right at the end. He talks about this incredible thing that a lot of people will know about, that he got terminal cancer diagnosis. And actually, he found that gave him a real lust for life, for what he thought was the last year of his life. He did a big tour. He started doing things that he'd never had the courage to do before. He'd always been worried about how long he would live and about illness, and suddenly all that went because he felt like he almost had a date beyond which he wouldn't go. He was going to make his life. And then right at the end of that year, it was actually a breakthrough. He was given an operation, and he was told that they'd basically taken the cancer away, and he was back to living as long a life as anyone else, potentially. At which point he became really paranoid and a hypochondriac again, and he said I was much here before. But it actually ends, and it's the last paragraph in the whole book, with this. He tells the story of his marriage. I don't want to ruin it for people because it's so moving, the way he describes it, the way he describes his love for his wife who he met when they were very young, and the life that they had together until he lost her. The words that he uses, I remember the voice that he spoke about her in. I don't think there's any woman who could read that and not think, oh, if I could find a man who felt about me the way Wilco felt about his wife, who they met at a school disco. They were together for a very, very long, happy time. That, to me, was the perfect way to end the book. I always remember that interview.
Yeah. And there's so many lovely letters in amongst it, and it's a huge list of names as well. I mean, it's not just kind of like local celebrities or whatever. I mean, it is global superstars that are all in there. So it's quite an incredible list of people. It's a fantastic book, and you must be very proud of it, I'm sure.
I am. That's why it's sitting. I mean, I could pull it out. It's right in front of me now because I keep it on my desk where I work, and which is where I am right now talking to you. And I always have it sitting there thinking, well, I've always loved books, and now I have my name in the front of one, and no matter what happens, that was my great ambition from the age of about 7. It was great for that to finally work out.
Fantastic. And do you have any other plans to kind of maybe do anything kind of similar, like another book at any point, or anything kind of one like that in the pipeline for you?
Well, yeah, it's possible that we'll do a part 2, because since that was published, we've done another. Well, it must be another kind of 100 interviews since then, and there are others that weren't in that first book, because you have to think about things like overseas sales and things like that. So there's a certain Americans and a certain amount of Australians and whatever. So we still have loads of really good names left over from that period, but also done some really good ones in the last couple of years, including Lin-Manuel Miranda of Hamilton. One of my absolute heroes. That was a day where I got the train to London. I did the interview, turned around and went straight back on the train again because I couldn't even stay overnight. all for an hour with Lynn, because I was just so excited to meet him. But yeah, so we've done so many good ones in the last couple of years, so there's no reason why we couldn't do book 2 of that, or something on those kind of lines. But or maybe I'll just my novel.
Yeah, you never know. One of the other great things about the letter to my younger self is, as well as, of course, is that all the royalties go to the big issue, which is obviously a great thing for so many people that's involved there. So it's another great thing.
Yeah, it's a win-win for everyone involved, everyone who buys it and everyone who is involved with the project.
Yeah, so it's fantastic. And as we mentioned at the start of the episode, you are the books editor for the big issue. And we are kind of getting close to Christmas time. You touched on it at the start a little bit about how the importance of kind of books as gifts and things like that. Do you have any big recommendations for people who are maybe looking for that perfect book Christmas gift that you've kind of seen recently?
Well, yeah, I had a quick thought about that. I mean, books that I've read in the last 2 months, depending on what kind of people you might be buying for. There's a book I've just reviewed by Edward Carey, who wrote Little, about the woman who founded Madame Tussauds. That was his book of last year, maybe the year before, but he's got a new book out called The Swallowed Man. And it is amazing. And it's basically a retelling of Pinocchio from the point of view of Geppetto inside the whale, looking back on his life when he made the wooden boy. And it's very kind of reflective and beautiful and poetic, but also quite strange and eccentric. He's Edward, an interesting guy. There's another one, Exciting Times, by this Nisha Dolan, the Irish writer, who's going to be a massive star, I'm pretty sure. This was, I reviewed that in the magazine a few months ago, and it just blew my socks off. It's kind of a bit like Sally Rooney, so obviously she's got a lot of fans. What do you call her? Escape my mind for a sec. The big TV show this year that she wrote the book of. Oh God, Normal People. It's a massive hit. It's a bit like that, but I thought even funnier, even more to the point, on the nose, I thought. And then for people who just love really gorgeous, luscious looking books with really interesting content, there's this big heavy monster. It's called The Madman's Library, put together by Edward Brooke Hitching with a hyphen. And it's basically about strange books and manuscripts and curiosities through history. And I want it to you now, Chris. Unfortunately, the podcast fan.
Yeah, but it's a very interesting cover.
Up on Amazon. So gorgeous. And it's full of pictures from these really weird different kinds of books that he's found, going right back for centuries and then right up until now, like the world's smallest book, which is about the size of a fingernail, but does have multiple pages, and then just some really weird, creepy, strange stuff. Loads of beautiful pictures in these books, and some of them are written on stones going that far back, and some of them are just very curious anthologies and collections of things that you wouldn't think anyone would ever have enough time in their life to make a collection of. So anyone you know who just likes weird, interesting things, or beautiful books written really well with a bit of wit, I would recommend that without a doubt.
Fantastic. And well, that kind of brings me pretty much to the end of the questions that I really had for you, really, in this episode. Have you got any plans for the future? Just to wrap up, maybe anything exciting in the pipeline for yourself, and are you kind of just sticking by reading books and enjoying them?
Well, I mean, I genuinely do have the dream job that I always wanted, ever since I was wee. I read and review books and commission book reviews for a living. I go on to the radio quite often and talk about books, recommend books. I work at home in my library, which is a whole room of bookshelves.
Yeah.
It's not the most simple job, so it's not the kind of, it's a job for someone who's enjoys a solitary life for a lot of the time. But when you do meet up, when you do get out into the outside world and you do meet up at events, or, you know, or when you are maybe doing reviews with a little circle of people, it's like-minded souls. It's people who love to involved in the arts, who love to talk about the arts, and so it's a very small, closed circle of a kind of a geeky, nerdy book lovers and music obsessives and film fans that I live in, but that is the place I'm most happy. So I'm happy to carry on doing that and to do my bit of writing on the side that, who knows, may end up being the next book, who knows.
Who knows? And I think that's as good a place to end there. But thank you very much, Jane, for coming and doing this episode with me. And I hope all the listeners have enjoyed this special Book Week Scotland episode of the podcast. And I hope you've enjoyed the events that we've had for Book Week Scotland so far as well. And you can leave us any feedback on the podcast by using hashtag FLB podcast on Twitter, or you can even drop us a wee email at librarypodcast@culturenl.co.uk as well. But that's all for us for now, guys. Thank you, Jane, again for coming and joining us. And we will be back again with our final episode of the current season of the podcast in a couple of weeks' time. But that's all for now, guys. Bye for now.